I'm Samantha Parker, 32 years old, and today is my housewarming. It's not just any house, this is the place I built for myself. After years of hard work, countless sleepless nights, and enough sacrifice to make even the most stoic person break, I finally bought my own home. The $900,000 price tag isn't the thing that makes it special, though. What matters is the journey, the story behind it, the struggles that nobody saw, the rejection from the people who should have supported me the most. But that's not even the worst part. Because, as I stand here in the foyer, the smell of fresh paint mingling with the aroma of the food the caterers are laying out, I feel a knot in my stomach. I've worked hard for this, harder than anyone will ever understand. And today of all days, my family shows up. They're here, my mother, my sister. I don't know why I invited them. Maybe I thought it would help. Maybe I thought it would feel normal. That this would be a way to bridge the years we've lost. But as soon as I see them, the old tension comes flooding back, that look in their eyes, the same one I've seen before, years ago. Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world, in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Growing up, my family looked perfect from the outside. We were one of those families you see in glossy magazine spreads, dad in finance, mom managing a boutique downtown, me and my sister Becky, always in matching outfits for family pictures, always on time for church. People envied us, or at least I thought they did. But under all that was something darker, a quiet dysfunction no one ever saw. There were the expectations that were never spoken, but always there. Expectations that I would be fine, that I could handle it all, that I was the one who didn't need anything. That was my role, right, to be the invisible one, to make it all work even when it didn't. I should have known something was wrong, but I never saw it coming. I just kept my head down, kept working, kept giving. My sister Becky always got the attention. She had her perfect family, her house in the suburbs, her 3 kids. And me, I was just the background. But that's the thing about being in the background, you see everything. Growing up, I always felt like I was playing a role, like I wasn't really allowed to exist outside the narrative everyone else had written for me. My mom, Karen, was always in control, always the picture-perfect hostess managing family dinners with effortless grace. But there was a coldness to it, a tension under the surface that nobody talked about. I never understood it until later, but I think it was because of Becky. My sister, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And then there was me, quiet, driven, always on the sidelines. At least that's how I saw it back then. Mom didn't hide it. It was clear who her favorite was. Becky got the attention, the praise, the love. Becky was the one who had a perfect marriage, a big house, kids who seemed to never misbehave. It wasn't just that Mom treated her differently, it was that I was invisible in comparison. I worked harder than anyone trying to be everything she wanted me to be, but I never seemed to get the acknowledgement. Every time I'd come home after a long day of working 3 jobs and tell her about my classes or achievements, she'd nod absent-mindedly, then change the subject to Becky's latest parenting triumph. Becky, on the other hand, was everything Mom had hoped for in a daughter. Perfectly put together, always in control. But it wasn't just her accomplishments that got her attention. It was the way she demanded it. And she did. I saw it even back then, even before I had the words to explain it. She knew how to manipulate, how to make people bend to her will. I didn't. I just did what I was told, worked harder, and kept my mouth shut. The cracks started to show when I was in high school, when Dad left. He packed his things one evening, told us he was moving to Florida, and that was it. No fight, no big emotional scene. Just a quiet departure. Becky and Mom were too absorbed in their own lives to care much, but for me, it was a huge loss. Dad had always been the softer one. The one who could see my struggles, even if he never truly understood them. Mom was too wrapped up in trying to maintain the image of the perfect family. And so, I was left to fend for myself, working twice as hard to make up for the emotional gap. As much as Mom tried to hold it together, I saw the toll it took on her. There was always this sense that she was on the verge of cracking, but that didn't stop her from demanding things of me. And so, I kept going. I kept doing it all, working late shifts at the diner, studying for my AP exams, helping her run errands, doing whatever she needed. Meanwhile, Becky was off living her life, doing what she did best, being the center of attention. The rest of us were just supporting characters in her story. By the time I was 18, I was exhausted, burned out, and ready for something more than just survival. I was ready to go to college. But Mom had other plans. It was on my 18th birthday that everything changed. I never expected much of a celebration. I didn't want it, honestly. It was a Tuesday. No cake, no party. Just another day, another set of responsibilities I had to shoulder. Becky was busy with her kids, and Mom, well, she had her own way of making everything about her. I'd come home after working a double shift at the diner, exhausted, but trying to act like I was fine. I should have known something was wrong when I walked into the kitchen and saw Becky sitting there with Mom, both of them staring at a spreadsheet like it was the most important thing in the world. "Hey, Mom." "Hey, Becky," I said, trying to sound casual, as I grabbed a plate of leftover lasagna from the fridge. "What's going on?" Mom barely looked up. "There's lasagna in the fridge if you're hungry." The words felt rehearsed, distant. I sat down and tried to focus on eating, but it was hard to ignore the way Becky was staring at me from the other side of the table, eyes narrowed. Something in her expression sent a chill down my spine. I didn't say anything, but the unease crept in, and when I looked closer at the papers spread out before them, I realized they weren't financial statements or bills like I initially thought. They were my college plans, my scholarships, my funding, and my college fund. I froze the fork halfway to my mouth. "Why do you have my college paperwork?" I asked, the words coming out too sharp for a question. Becky sighed dramatically, like she couldn't be bothered to keep up the charade. "We might as well tell her mom." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. This wasn't right. I didn't need to hear whatever they were going to say next. But I had no choice. Mom finally looked up from the papers. "Samantha, we need to talk about your college plans," she said, her voice colder than I ever remembered. "Becky and Eric, they need a bigger house now that Benjamin is on the way." I tried to keep my voice steady. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked, even though I already knew. "You see," Becky chimed in, "with Eric's bonus not being as big as they thought, we're a bit short. We need to use your college fund to help with the down payment." She said it with such finality, as if it was already decided. As if I had no say in the matter. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. "That money, that's for my education, Mom. It's the money Dad set aside for me." My voice was shaking, but I tried to keep it together. This wasn't happening. Not like this. Not now. Becky rolled her eyes. "Come on, Sam. We've been over this. What's the point of a college fund if you're not even going to use it for college? You're going to community college anyway. So why don't you just—" "No," I cut her off, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. But it was also the only word that made sense. "No, this is my money, and it's not for your house. It's for my future." I stood up suddenly, aware of how badly my hands were shaking. Mom was unmoved. "Look, this isn't a negotiation, Samantha. We're doing what needs to be done. Your sister's family has 3 kids to support. You're an adult now. You can figure out your own way." Her words were sharp, calculated. They hit like a slap. "Don't be selfish," Becky sneered. "We're talking about a home for my kids. Where are they supposed to sleep if we don't move into a bigger place?" I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Instead, I clutched the edge of the table, my knuckles white. I've been working since I was 15. I've worked harder than anyone in this family, and I deserve to go to college. That fund is mine, not yours. "You don't get it," Becky said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're just going to take out loans like everyone else. We don't have the luxury of sitting around while you chase your little dreams." I could feel the walls closing in on me. My throat tightened. "I've worked so hard, Mom," I whispered, but neither of them seemed to hear me. "And I won't let you steal this from me." Mom didn't even flinch. Instead, she stood up and crossed her arms, her face hardening. "Then you'll have to leave." "I'm sorry, but if that's how it's going to be, pack your bags." I felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. What I barely managed. "You heard me," she snapped, voice cold. "You're 18 now, you're an adult. If you don't want to help your sister, then pack your bags and leave. That's your choice." That was it, the final straw. The line I couldn't cross. I didn't have any words left. I didn't have a choice anymore. "I'll pack my bags," I said quietly. The words barely felt real as I said them. I stood up and turned to walk down the hall, each step feeling heavier than the last. I don't know what I expected, maybe for someone to stop me, maybe for Mom to soften, maybe for Becky to say something, anything to make this better. But they didn't. They just stood there frozen. I packed everything I could in a suitcase that night, clothes, a few books, my laptop. I didn't bother taking anything else. I didn't need it. I didn't want it. Family had just proven to me that I wasn't worth their support. And it was in that moment I realized I'd be okay on my own. I spent the next 2 weeks sleeping in my car. That part was hard to admit even now. I wasn't sure if I'd ever say it out loud, how many nights I parked in the Walmart lot, my jacket rolled up for a pillow. The gym became my bathroom, and the fast food drive-thru my only real human interaction. I didn't want to burden anyone, so I kept up the act. I showed up to my shifts at the diner, like everything was normal, masking the exhaustion I felt deep in my bones. But in a strange way, I felt liberated. I was finally free. The weight of my family's expectations, their manipulations, all of it was gone. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to live up to someone else's idea of who I should be. I could decide my future. I could chase my dream, whatever that was, without anyone telling me what was acceptable or not. I used the money I had left to rent a cheap room in a dingy motel, the kind where the walls are thin and the carpets never seem to be clean. But I was safe, and I finally had a place to think. It was around then that I started putting together a plan, an idea that had been growing in my mind for years. I'd always been good with technology. In high school, I had built my first website for a school project. I remember the thrill of watching it go live, seeing something I created from scratch exist on the internet. It was the first time I felt like I had power over my own future. It was a taste of what was possible, and I wanted more. But I didn't have the funds or the resources to follow through. Until now. So I took the money I had left from my part-time jobs and started investing it into a tech idea I'd been toying with for months. I started coding late into the night, fueled by whatever energy I could scrape together. I taught myself everything I could, web development, app design, and marketing. There were nights I didn't sleep at all, just coding and trying to get this thing to work. One day, after weeks of hard work, I had the basics of my first app, an intuitive, easy-to-use financial tool aimed at helping young adults manage their money. I called it SendSense. It was simple, but it worked. It helped people track their spending, set up savings goals, and build credit, all things I wished I had known about when I was younger. I remember the first time I showed it to my best friend Olivia. She was always the one who believed in me. She was the person who didn't look at me as the quiet one who was always in the background. She knew I had more in me, and her support was the first real validation I'd gotten in years. Olivia's face lit up when I showed her SendSense. "This is incredible," she said, looking over the design and the features. "We have to do something with this." And so we did. We launched the app and started getting the word out. It wasn't an immediate success, but we didn't expect it to be. We were two young women with no investor backing, no real funding. But we believed in it. We believed in ourselves. Slowly, the app started gaining traction. Small blogs began to take notice, and we even got featured on a couple of financial podcasts. But even as our success grew, I couldn't shake the feeling of what I'd left behind. My family was still out there, still living in the bubble of denial. Mom never reached out, never apologized for the way she'd treated me. Becky was probably too wrapped up in her own life to even notice what I was doing. And Dad, he sent an occasional text, some vague pleasantries, but it felt hollow. I was building something finally, something that was mine, but it still hurt that they couldn't see me for what I had accomplished. I pushed the thought out of my mind as best as I could. I had work to do, a future to build. I wasn't going to let them pull me back into that cycle of disappointment. Then one day we got our first big break. The day of my housewarming arrived, and I felt the familiar knot in my stomach tighten. I'd spent months getting this place just right, fixing it up, painting walls, installing hardwood floors. This house, this home, represented more than just my success. It was my redemption. It was everything I had fought for in the face of my family's betrayal. Yet here I was, standing in the foyer, trying to ignore the fact that the very people who had tried to crush me were on their way over. I tried to shake it off. After all, I invited them. This was supposed to be a new chapter, a fresh start. I hadn't seen them in years, but now, on this special day, I thought it might be the right moment to break the ice. Maybe, just maybe, this house would serve as some kind of bridge some way to heal the fractures in our relationship. But as soon as I opened the door and saw them standing there, Mom, Becky, and Daniel, I knew I had made a mistake. Becky stood at the front, her smile almost too wide, too rehearsed. Mom was behind her fidgeting with her purse, like she was already uncomfortable being here. Daniel? He was just there. He always seemed to disappear into the background when it came to real conversations. I forced a smile, stepping aside to let them in. "It's great to see you," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I hated this. I hated that I still felt the need to please them, to make them see me. The ones who had never been there for me when I needed them most. And yet, here I was, still wanting their approval. But I didn't have the luxury of ignoring them today. It was supposed to be a celebration. So I pushed it all down, shoved it to the back of my mind, and showed them around the house. "This is beautiful, Samantha," Mom said, her tone neutral, her gaze flicking from room to room as she took it all in. "You've really done well for yourself." I didn't know if she meant it or not. It didn't matter. I wasn't doing this for her approval. "Thank you," I replied, trying to hold it together. I wanted it to be something I could be proud of. The tour continued, and every time I looked at Becky, I could feel her eyes following me, sizing me up. She was looking for something, anything that might make her feel entitled to my success. I could see it in the way she lingered by the windows, how her fingers brushed along the countertops, as though she were calculating how much space my home could give to her growing family. The whole thing felt off. The way they moved through the house, the way they talked about the renovations, the small, subtle comments. "This would be a great spot for a dining table," Becky mused as she glanced into the dining room. "The kids would love the backyard. It's perfect for them." Each comment stung a little more than the last. It wasn't just the house they were looking at. They were looking at me. I could feel it, a sense of ownership, a desire to lay claim to something that wasn't theirs. It was the same way I felt when I was younger, when I was forced to take a back seat in my own life. But this time, it wasn't happening. Mom was more subdued, but her presence was just as uncomfortable. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, as if she were watching for any sign that I might break, that I might slip up and fall back into that role of the good daughter who always did what was asked of her. The tension was palpable, and I was done pretending. This wasn't a family reunion. This wasn't a celebration. They weren't here to reconnect. They were here to remind me of who they thought I should be. And I wasn't going to stand for it. Not anymore. I excused myself from the group and made my way to the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe. The house felt too small all of a sudden, even though it was much bigger than the tiny apartment I'd rented a year ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, taking a quick glance. It was Olivia. "Are you okay?" the text read. I smiled at the screen, feeling a flicker of warmth. Olivia had been there for me through all of it. The ups, the downs, the chaos. And she was the one person who never expected anything from me, except my best. Yeah, I typed back, though. I wasn't sure if I believed it. Just a lot to process. "You got this," she responded almost immediately. I could almost hear her voice in my head, her calm and steady tone. And for a second, I felt a small sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't alone, not this time, not ever again. But when I heard footsteps behind me, I knew the storm was about to hit. "Sam, we need to talk," Becky said from the doorway, her voice crisp, controlled. The way she said it made my stomach drop. This wasn't a friendly chat. This wasn't just catching up after all these years. This was something else. I looked at her, trying to mask the unease building inside me. "What's on your mind?" I asked, my tone more neutral than I felt. She stepped into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the room, as if measuring the space, mentally calculating where she and her family could settle in. I couldn't help but notice the way her gaze lingered on the walls, the polished countertops, and the spacious rooms. It felt invasive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was already making plans for how this house could fit her and her family. "I know this place cost a lot," she started, her voice smooth, but with an underlying tone of entitlement. "But you're not using it all, are you? I mean, you're single, no kids. This is way more space than you need." I blinked. Was she seriously suggesting what I thought she was? "Becky, what are you talking about?" I managed to say, my heart pounding. Her expression didn't change. She was playing a game I knew all too well. "Look, Sam," she said, her voice softer now, almost patronizing. "We've been struggling, you know. Eric lost his job, and things have been tight. You have this huge, beautiful house, and I don't know, I just thought you'd want to help." My chest tightened. I could feel the blood rushing to my face. "Help with what?" Her smile deepened, and she casually stepped closer to me, as if making her point more convincing. "We need a bigger home. You know, for the kids, they need more space, a bigger backyard. You're already successful." I figured, "Well, you could give us your house. It's a perfect fit for us." I felt my pulse in my temples. It was happening. I couldn't believe it, but I knew it was coming. The audacity, the gall. She was actually asking me to give her my home. "Are you serious?" My voice came out rough, but it didn't matter. I had to let it out. "You think I'm going to hand over my home to you?" After everything, I couldn't keep the bitterness from leaking into my words. "You want me to just give you everything I worked for? No way." Becky's expression faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, her eyes narrowing. "Look, Sam, you don't have kids. You don't need a house this big. We need this. I'm just asking you to be reasonable." Reasonable. The last 12 years of my life had been spent being reasonable, being the one who always made sacrifices, who took a step back for everyone else. And now, when I finally had something that was mine, she was telling me I should just hand it over. The nerve. "I'm not giving you my house, Becky," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "You can't just walk in here and ask me to give up my life. I've spent years building this. Do you have any idea what it took for me to get here? Do you remember when I was working 3 jobs while you were posting your perfect family photos online? You never had to work for anything. And now, you want me to give this to you." Becky's face twisted. "You're being selfish. It's not like you need all this space, and you're making it all about you. You're acting like you've been the only one who's had it hard." I let out a bitter laugh, stepping back, as the anger and frustration built in me. "You really don't get it, do you? It's not about the house, Becky. It's about respect. You and Mom have never respected me. I've spent my life trying to prove that I deserve anything for myself. And now, you think I'm going to let you walk in here and take everything I've fought for?" Becky's eyes flickered to the door, where Mom stood listening in silence. I could see the fear in her eyes, but she didn't speak up. She never did when it came to Becky. She didn't intervene when I was 18, and she certainly wouldn't now. "Fine," Becky said, her voice suddenly cold. "If that's how you feel, then I guess this conversation is over." "Yeah," I snapped. "It is." I turned away from them, stepping toward the door, trying to regain control of my breathing. The anger was hot in my chest, but it wasn't just about Becky. It wasn't even just about my house. It was about everything, every moment I had sacrificed, every time I had put my needs second to theirs. I needed to make this stop. I needed to draw the line here. "Sam, wait," Mom said, her voice quieter now. I turned, seeing her step closer, but this time I didn't want to hear what she had to say. "No, Mom, I'm done," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not doing this anymore." The silence in the room was deafening, and as I glanced at Becky, I could see the faint flicker of something, guilt maybe, or maybe something else behind her cold exterior. But it didn't matter anymore. They had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again. The housewarming was over whether they wanted it to be or not. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought the confrontation would end with them storming out, leaving me with nothing but a knot in my stomach and an overwhelming sense of defeat. But no, this wasn't that kind of story. I wasn't going to let it end like that. Not after everything I had been through. Not after everything I had worked for. As I stood in the living room, the weight of my words hanging in the air, I realized I needed to show them. I needed proof. And not just for them, but for myself too. Proof that they had never cared. Proof that I was right all along, that they had taken from me, used me, manipulated me, and that it had to stop. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly, as I scrolled through the documents I'd uploaded earlier in the day. I'd known this moment was coming. I'd known they would try to walk back in and take what wasn't theirs, just like they always had. So I prepared myself. I wasn't just going to let this go. I tapped a few times on the screen and connected it to the smart TV in the living room. The large, flat screen blinked to life, casting a soft glow on the room. I felt a sudden rush of adrenaline as I watched their eyes flick to the screen, their expressions turning from confusion to growing realization. "What's this?" Becky asked, her voice suddenly tight, her confidence cracking. I didn't answer her immediately. Instead, I let the documents do the talking. First came the credit report, clear and unmistakable. "This is the fraud you committed against me," I said calmly, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling underneath. Becky's eyes widened as she saw the credit card applications, the loans taken out in my name, loans, that I had never authorized, loans that I had to spend years paying off. It was all laid out in black and white, and the numbers were shocking. There were charges, payments, and withdrawal details, all leading back to her, all leading back to that time in my life when I thought I was doing what was right by supporting my family. "You did this," I said softly. "You opened credit cards in my name, took out loans, and then used them for your own benefit. That was my college fund. That was money that was supposed to be for me." Becky looked frozen, her mouth opening and closing, as if searching for the words, but finding none. She looked at the screen, then at Mom, but neither of them spoke. No defense, no excuse, just silence. Then came the bank statements, the transfers, the loan payments. It was all there. It didn't matter how she tried to explain it. The paper trail was too clear. I'd tracked everything down, every penny, every signature that didn't belong to me. And the scariest part, some of it was done in front of my face, with me none the wiser. They had used my name, my identity, my future to fund their lavish lifestyle. "How could you do this?" I asked, my voice cracking as I felt the weight of it all. "How could you use me like that?" Becky's eyes darted nervously to the door, but this time I wasn't giving her an escape route. "Why didn't you stop me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely audible. I could see the cracks now, the vulnerability she never let show before. But it was too late. It was too late for apologies. The truth was out. There was no hiding it anymore. I hadn't just been a victim of manipulation. I'd been robbed of my future, and it had been done in the name of family. Mom finally spoke, her voice shaky, like she was realizing the full extent of what had happened. "I didn't know," she started, but I shook my head, cutting her off. "You didn't know?" I asked, incredulous. "You didn't know when Becky was using my social security number to open credit cards? Or when you told me my college fund was being used for her down payment, you knew?" She stammered, but the words didn't come. What could she say? The damage was done. "I didn't want to believe it," she whispered almost to herself. "Well, you can't pretend anymore," I said, my voice firm. "I paid off every last cent of those debts, Mom. I worked 3 jobs to pay off loans I never took out. I went to college while I was scraping by, while I was starving, for something that wasn't even mine to begin with. I couldn't hold back the frustration anymore. It had been so long, so many years of anger and confusion and resentment that I finally let it out. I was 18 and you kicked me out. And all along, you and Becky were stealing from me. You destroyed my future, and then you had the nerve to ask for more." Silence. Heavy, thick silence filled the room, and I didn't care. I had said what needed to be said. The truth was out, and it wasn't going back in the box. And then I turned to Dad. He had been standing there watching all of it unfold, but now he stepped forward, his face ashen. "I didn't know," he said, looking directly at me. "I didn't know about the fraud. I didn't know you were suffering. I failed you, Sam. I should have fought harder." I could feel a pit in my stomach open up. "You should have," I replied, the weight of his words sinking in. But I wasn't looking for an apology from him anymore. "You should have been there." But the damage had been done. The family I had fought for, the family I had trusted, was never going to be the same. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The silence in the room felt suffocating. The air seemed heavier with each passing second, as if everything I had tried to ignore for so many years was finally coming to the surface. I had spent so much of my life trying to please them, trying to be the daughter they wanted me to be. And now, standing in my own home, holding the proof of their betrayal, I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for them. Becky was the first to break the silence, though her voice lacked the usual conviction. "You're making this all about you, Sam." She said her words sharp, but the edge was gone, replaced by something like fear. "This isn't about what happened years ago. We're talking about now, about what we need, about our family. You have everything. Can't you just give us something?" Her words felt like a slap, but this time I didn't flinch. Instead, I let out a soft, almost bitter laugh. What part of no don't you understand, Becky? You can't just take everything I've built and pretend like you have some divine right to it. I shook my head, feeling the weight of years of resentment flood over me. What you're asking for is more than I can give, and I'm not going to let you walk all over me again. Not like you did when I was 18. Becky's eyes narrowed, but I could see the cracks. The strong, confident facade she always wore was starting to crumble, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorry for her. Mom finally spoke up, her voice trembling with a mix of defensiveness and guilt. Sam, you're being too hard on her. This is family. We've always been there for you, haven't we? She didn't look at me directly, choosing instead to focus on the floor, as though she could avoid the truth by avoiding my gaze. I couldn't hold back any longer. Family, really. This is what family does. They steal from each other. They lie and manipulate and expect to be given more. Is that what you've been teaching Becky all these years? I took a step toward her, my heart pounding in my chest, but my words sharp and steady. I've been paying for your mistakes, Mom. I paid off debts I didn't incur. I went through hell to get here. And now you're telling me that's not enough, that I should just give it all up for you. Her lips trembled, and for a moment, I almost thought she would break down. But she didn't. Instead, she did what she always did. She shifted the blame. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered, barely audible. You've always been so independent, Sam. You've always been the one who could take care of herself. I just thought you'd understand. I thought you'd want to help. Help! I repeated, incredulity rising in my chest. You thought I'd want to help you destroy my own future, that I'd just roll over and let you take everything I worked for. Dad, who had been standing by silently for most of the conversation, stepped forward. Sam, I didn't know, he said quietly, his voice heavy with regret. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know the extent of what they'd done. I should have fought harder to protect you. His words were like a knife to the gut, but I didn't want to hear it anymore. You should have fought, Dad. You should have been there for me. You should have stood up for me, but instead, you chose to turn your back on me. You let Mom and Becky make all the decisions, and I was left to pick up the pieces. The pain of it all rushed through me in a flood, and I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. The betrayal stung, but it wasn't just the money or the college fund. It was the fact that my family had never seen me. They had never seen me for what I was capable of, for what I had achieved on my own. And now, standing in front of them, I realized something. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need them to tell me I was enough. I already knew. You want something from me. You've already taken everything you're going to get. I said, my voice steady now. I'm done. I've been done for years, and I'm not going to let you steal from me anymore. There was a long pause. Dad opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't let him. Get out, I said, my voice as calm as it had ever been. The party's over. I didn't wait for them to respond. I turned on my heel and walked toward the kitchen, my heart racing, as I heard their footsteps behind me. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't scared of losing them. They had already lost me. When I came back to the living room, they were standing by the door, frozen in place. The kids who had been playing upstairs were nowhere to be seen. I didn't care. They weren't my responsibility. I didn't need to say anything else. I didn't need to explain myself. I had done enough. I looked at them one last time and spoke the words I had been holding in for years. You don't get to treat me like this anymore. I don't need your approval. I don't need your guilt. I'm done. With that, I stepped back, waiting for them to leave. And they did slowly, without another word. The door clicked shut behind them, and I stood there, letting the silence settle around me. I had drawn my line in the sand, and for the first time in my life I felt free. The door closed behind my family, but the weight of their departure still hung in the air. I stood there alone in the foyer of my house, listening to the echoes of their footsteps retreating down the hallway. The silence in the house was almost suffocating, but it was also comforting in a way. The noise, the tension, the constant pull of familial expectations, it was gone. I walked slowly through the house, touching the walls as if I were grounding myself. The beautiful hardwood floors beneath my feet felt solid, steady, real. Every corner of this place held a story, my story. Each room a chapter of resilience, of late nights, coding of pushing myself past the limits. It wasn't just a house, it was a symbol of everything I had fought for. But as much as the quiet soothed me, there was an underlying tension I couldn't shake. The guilt. It had crept in ever since I told them to leave. Did I do the right thing? Was this really what I needed to feel at peace? The answer was clear, but it wasn't as simple as I'd like to think. They were my family. Even after everything that happened, a part of me still wanted their approval. But I couldn't keep letting them use me. I couldn't keep letting them manipulate me into sacrificing myself for them. So I walked into the kitchen, where I had spent so many nights making coffee, planning my future, and trying to make sense of what was happening around me. The kitchen was one of my favorite rooms in the house. It was spacious with big windows that let the light flood in. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Then I pulled out my phone. I had promised myself that I wouldn't engage in any more emotional back and forths with them. I wasn't going to open the door for manipulation again. Still, the number on the screen was hard to ignore. It was from Dad. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to hear him out. Maybe he had a new perspective. Maybe he'd seen the error of his ways. Maybe he finally understood how much I had sacrificed to get here. But then, I remembered everything. The years of silence, the moments when I needed him most, and he chose to look the other way. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned off my phone and put it down on the counter. The past was just that, past. I didn't need to be bound to it anymore. I spent the rest of the day quietly walking through my house, letting the peace settle over me. I didn't need to rush into anything. No more guilt. No more second-guessing myself. I had made my stand, and now I could breathe. The next few weeks were different. Without the weight of my family's expectations hanging over me, I was able to focus entirely on my work. Sense was taking off in ways I hadn't anticipated. The app had grown from something small and personal to a legitimate business. I was getting offers from investors, and the attention from tech blogs was starting to build. I felt my confidence grow with every new milestone. But the most significant change came when I started rebuilding my relationships with people who truly cared about me. Olivia was there every step of the way, always supporting, always reminding me that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. We celebrated together every time Sense hit a new milestone, and slowly I began to realize that the real family, the family I had chosen, was the one that had always believed in me. I kept up my visits with my nieces and nephews. I knew they were caught in the middle, but I couldn't completely cut them off. They weren't the ones who had made these decisions. I started taking Thomas to coding workshops, spending afternoons with Natalie at the museum, and even introducing them to new experiences that had nothing to do with the toxic cycles their parents had set in motion. It wasn't about fixing the past, it was about building something better for them. And then, just when I thought everything had settled, the unexpected happened. Becky reached out. I wasn't sure what to expect when I saw her name flash across my screen. It had been a month since the housewarming, and I hadn't heard from her since. Her message was simple, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how much I hurt you. I want to do better. Can we talk?" It wasn't much, but it was more than I had ever received from her. I sat there staring at the screen, the guilt creeping back in. I didn't want to let her back in, didn't want to fall into the same traps I had before. But at the same time, I knew this was a moment of growth, a chance to set the boundaries I had never been able to before. I took a deep breath and sent her a reply. "I'm willing to listen, but things have to be different. I can't go back to the way things were." I wasn't sure where this would lead, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let anyone, family, or not take anything from me ever again. A few days later, Becky and I met at a coffee shop. It wasn't what I expected. There were no dramatic apologies, no tear-filled confessions. Instead, it was more like two strangers sitting across from each other, trying to make sense of a past that was never really theirs to rewrite. She looked different, quieter somehow, as if something inside her had shifted. The woman sitting in front of me wasn't the same Becky who had tried to manipulate me into giving up my home, or the one who had taken advantage of my kindness for years. She was vulnerable in a way I wasn't used to seeing, and maybe for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the person I had once hoped she'd become. I wasn't sure if this was genuine change or just another round of manipulation, but I was done playing the victim. "Sam," She began, her voice softer than I remembered. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, about how I treated you, and I'm sorry. I know I've hurt you. I know I've taken things from you. Things that were never mine to take. I wasn't sure what to say." After all, those were the words I had wanted to hear for years. The words that never came. But hearing them now, I realized they didn't matter as much as I thought they would. The apology, while important, wasn't enough to erase the years of betrayal. "I don't need you to apologize, Becky," I replied quietly. "What I needed all along was respect. What I needed was for you to see me, not just as the one who could always be counted on to fix things, but as someone with my own dreams, my own life. I've spent so many years living in your shadow, trying to prove my worth to people who would never see it." She was silent for a long moment, and I could see her eyes welling up with tears. But this time, I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt nothing except a quiet sense of closure. I had said everything I needed to say. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I think I've been so caught up in my own life, my own needs, that I didn't even realize I was doing it." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I wasn't trying to change her or fix anything. I just saw her for who she was, a woman trapped in her own insecurities, afraid to admit that she had taken so much from the people who loved her. "I know you didn't," I said, taking a deep breath. "But you did. And that's okay. I'm not here to fight anymore. I've made my peace with that. But I need you to understand something, Becky. I can't keep being the person you lean on when it's convenient for you. I won't let you use me anymore." She nodded, a mixture of regret and something else, maybe relief, on her face. "I understand. I really do." The conversation shifted, after that, slowly moving away from the past and into the present. Becky asked about my work, about Sense, and how everything was going. For the first time in a long time, it felt like a real conversation, one that wasn't clouded by manipulation or guilt. I told her about the new opportunities that had come my way, the investors who were interested, and the growth I had seen with the app. I could see her trying to hold back a smile when I talked about it. "You've done amazing things, Sam," she said quietly, the words laced with genuine admiration. "I'm proud of you." It was a small gesture, but it meant more to me than anything she had ever said before. I realized in that moment that I didn't need her approval. What I had built was mine. I had done it on my own, and that was more than enough. We didn't talk about the past much after that. We talked about life, about our differences, and about how things had changed between us. I wasn't ready to say everything was okay, but I could see the possibility of something new, something that didn't involve resentment or guilt. A few weeks later, I sent Becky an invitation. It was for a small gathering, just me, Olivia, and a few close friends from work. I wasn't sure how things would go, but I knew I was ready to take the next step in healing. I wasn't asking for a full reconciliation, but I was open to seeing if something different could happen between us. Maybe, just maybe, we could start from scratch. Becky accepted the invitation, and when she arrived at my house, it felt like the first real step toward rebuilding something honest, something without manipulation. We didn't talk about the past, but we shared small moments, laughs, and even a few conversations about the future. It was awkward, but it was also hopeful. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. Healing takes time, especially when the wounds run deep. But as I looked around my home, my sanctuary, the place I had built from the ground up, I realized that I had already come so far. This house was more than just walls and windows. It was the embodiment of everything I had worked for, everything I had survived. I wasn't afraid of what the future held anymore. I wasn't afraid to set boundaries, to walk away from the people who had tried to break me, and to say no when I needed to. As I sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and orange, I finally felt at peace. I had reclaimed my life. I had reclaimed my power. And that was all that mattered. Have you ever had to stand up to family and reclaim your voice, even when it meant walking away from everything familiar? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. What boundaries have you had to set, and how did it change your life? If this journey resonated with you, please like the video, subscribe for more deep dives into stories about growth and healing, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is say no to the people you love most. but that no can also be your first real yes to yourself. Remember, protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's survival. And from survival comes strength, clarity, and the freedom to live on your own terms. Thank you for listening, and until next time, take care of your heart.